So, good afternoon, everyone. This is a recording for this first lecture I'm going to do on the theme of applied probabilistic machine learning. So, this is an introductory lecture, and we will see the first concept. So, first of all, my name is Hugues Richard. So, I'm from France. I'm a researcher at the Robert Koch Institute in the Bioinformatics unit. And my main area of research is to do statistical modeling and machine learning, and it's mainly with the idea of analyzing high-throughput sequencing data analysis, and I propose computational method for those analysis. So just to fix you the concept, I represented here the central dogma of molecular biology, where you can see that the flow of information in the cell is first encoded in the DNA, then transcribed into messenger RNA. And the messenger RNA are then translated into protein, which make most of the cellular activity of the cell. And the thing is that since more than 10 or 15 years, we have a possibility, mainly with sequencing, but with other technology, to really interrogate cells at different levels of this flow of information and by sequencing. And so in this context, I'm doing methods to be able to make sense of this huge amount of data. And this problem of having a lot of data is not limited to biology, of course. And as you may have heard many times, we are now in the era of big data. So which means data with very large dimensionality, but that we can accumulate in a large quantity. So we need automated method to be able to analyze this data. And that's one of the goals of what we call machine learning. And one way to analyze automatically those data is to use probabilistic models, probabilities, to be able to quantify uncertainties in the data, or also the randomness of some of the way those data are generated. The main problem is that, as we will see today in the first course, when we start to have data of large dimensionality, we cannot look at the full joint distribution of all the variables we are monitoring at the same time. It's too costly, and because of the curse of dimensionality, we'll never be able to accumulate so much data. So one way to overcome this problem is to constrain the data by imposing conditional dependencies between the variables that we are looking at. And those conditional dependencies can be summarized by a graph. This is what you can see here on this little example, where we look at three variables. So is let's say on the grass in the front of a house. We can measure if it's raining, if the sprinkler, so the machine which is throwing water on the grass is worked this day, and if the grass is wet. And you can see that we can capture how the state of each of these variables depend on each other. And this is what this type of conditioning, so for instance here, if it's raining, there is very little chance that the sprinkler will be working. And if it's not raining, of course, 60% of the time, the sprinkler will be working. And this is what we can capturing by this conditioning. So we can introduce an order between the different variables. And we can summarize those dependencies with a graph. And this is why we say that we work in this case with graphical models. And as you can imagine, there are many ways to construct those graphs or to propose structure on the graph, which will have different properties. And the goal of this course is to exactly look at those graphical models within the context of machine learning, so of learning, and to have somehow a little compendium, a little list of all the possible models, all the traditional models that we can encounter and that can be described as graphical models. And we will always look at those models within a learning perspective, so with the idea that those models can be used for supervised or unsupervised learning, so for classification mainly or clustering. And of course, there is first the need to specify the type of model, but then we need to be able usually to estimate those models, estimate the model parameters, and be able to build the models. And we'll spend some time on that, and we'll also look. So the model can, as I said, have a lot of variables. So we'll also look what are the algorithmic challenges which come with the inference of model parameters and the model building, the building on the model in both cases. So let's just have a short look here for this introductory course on the different types of models. The first model we'll look at is something I guess you already encountered, which are called a mixture model, which is usually a way to describe heterogeneity in the data, where we say that we have an hidden variable which changes the distribution of the data, which has different parameters depending on the distribution, depending on the data point. So here, for instance, for this example of eruption data in a geyser, you can see that we have two clouds of points, and the mixture model is a way to say that, to think that we have in fact two bivariate normal distribution which have different center, and it's a way to capture this type of heterogeneity. And of course, those models are really practical if one wants to do a clustering of the data. Here it's another example in image analysis on the bottom, which I think is also interesting, where the idea is to be able to segment an image into regions which correspond to the same type of information. And you can decide how many class, so how many heterogeneity you want in your data. It's increasing here from left to right, and this gives you a way to compress, to summarize the data into class which are uniform. Okay, so that's the first class model. We will see then a second class of model are models which are in general hierarchical model, but in particular model which are constructed to deal with sequential data. So those are models where we think the data we obtain is oriented with respect to usually time, or to, let's say, to one into one direction. And the first model that can be used for that are Markovian models, and will then extend to models which have been very powerful, especially in the beginning in speech recognition. This is the example I showed here, but then in biology, which are hidden Markov models. And the more generic extension of those type of models are then Bayesian networks, which are simply generic directed acyclic graph built on those graphical models, and which allow to capture very complex dependency between many variables. And here is an example I showed on the right, is a probabilistic expert system, which was built from intensive care unit data, where depending on the different variables that are measured in an intensive care unit, the system will trigger or not an alarm on the for the patient. Then a last class of model, which I wanted to do as the last example, are models which are latent direct annotation. Those are models which are generic models which have been very successful for classification of documents. And the idea is that each document is seen as a mixture of topics, with each topic being a distribution of a word. And so document classification then is done by separating documents which are mixing topic in different ways. So let's say it's a more generic model than a simple mixture model where another layer of mixing is added. Okay, so this is roughly the type of model we will look at. Each time we will have a small project according to the model we look, and I decided this is the plan I'm having for the lecture. So the first lecture will look at simple introduction of machine learning and probabilistic models, and we will describe the naive Bayes classifier, or just do a reminder on this naive Bayes classifier if you already saw it. Then in the second lecture, we'll move to an example for unsupervised learning with a mixture model and the EM algorithm, which we'll see also how the EM algorithm can be used in general, because that's a method for parameter estimation or data imputation that will which is very powerful and which can be used on most of the model that we'll see afterwards. So then we will move to sequential data with Markov models and hidden Markov models. We look at Bayesian networks, latent direct allocation, and if you have time, I wanted to do a last lecture on continuous latent variable. So, what is the probabilistic framework when we want to do not exactly machine learning, but data analysis, exploratory data analysis. So, for instance, principal component analysis, which I guess many of you know, or independent component analysis, which is an extension of PCA. So as you can notice, there are less lecture than the number of courses, but as we will do correction of exercises and also a presentation of a small project and let's say presentation and question of a small project, I'm expecting that we will have to we'll use more than one course each time for each of those lectures. So this was for a short presentation of the course. So what are the learning goals for today? So we will first remind shortly what is the task of machine learning. Today I will just speak about the task of machine learning for unsupervised learning, so classification or regression. And then we'll directly move to how this machine learning formulation can be formulated from a probabilistic perspective. And as a first example, we will look at the naive Bayes classifier and do a little walk-in on using this classifier on data. So what is machine learning? So in the case, as I said, let's first detail that in the case of supervised learning. So we observe jointly a set of data, which we can call X. So those are a set of n vectors, which correspond to a certain amount of feature. Here I used D features, and for each of these data points, I have a output Y, which is associated to it. When I'm training the data, this is what we have, and we want to be able to predict from the data we observe, the XY, what is the output YY. Okay? And so the task of supervised learning is simply, can we estimate a function which in all generality on a given problem, if I give it a vector X, it can predict Y in the best possible way. So it can predict what will be the output in the best way. Okay? And so for this task, we can divide, depending on what is the type of Y, we can, let's say, separate in two types of learning, of supervised learning. So in the first case, we have discrete classes, which are described by Y. So we call that classification. So Y is, for instance, is summarized by an integer value. So The most traditional way of classifying is to do binary class classification. This is what we will do, not always, but most of the time. But you can also have multi-class classification where you have more than 2 classes you want to classify. And of course, the examples are relatively easy to think of. We'll see many, but as a typical example for classification, we could think about having images of digits, which are written, and based on these images, we want to predict what is the digits. In this case, we'll have 10 classes from 0 to 9 that we want to classify. And so when we have this problem of classification, if we want to formulate that as what is the let's say the mathematical problem we want to solve, we want to find a function f hat, such that the misclassification error, so let's say the number of error of classification we are doing, is minimized. Of course, there can be, here I just count the number of errors we would have on a testing data set, but this can be, this misclassification error function can be adapted depending to the case. If you have, for instance, if you have classes which have a very different proportion, this can be adapted to reweight according to the proportion of the classes. Okay, so this is the case of classification. And in the case of regression, and something that I guess you already encountered also many times, the output variable is a real valued variable. And so we want to predict, depending on a certain amount of descriptors, what will be a response variable, y, which can be real value. And so in this case, we want to minimize the loss. So the formulation is also to find a function, a class of function, which will then, a function among a class of function, which will then minimize the loss, which is computed between the predicted point and the real point. So of course, in general, in machine learning, which is thought about in general, the task is mainly to find this function without making much hypothesis, if only, so most of the hypotheses are made on the class, on the type of function you're looking at, and on the procedure you're using to minimize your misclassification error. So I guess if we would like to take just a simple example in each case, for classification, I guess you already saw, for instance, a very traditional machine learning technique, which is a support vector machine, SVM, and then f hat is an hyperplane such that margin errors is minimized on the training data. But there are many other procedures, of course, that correspond to the classification problem that will then optimize different, that will correspond to different procedures to find a class of function that can minimize this misclassification error. The main problem being that, of course, usually we train the data on a subset, and we want to have a function f that is that can be generalized enough, that can be generalized, and so that it doesn't learn only specificity in this training data. Okay, and for regression, a simple example we could think of in machine learning is just a linear model, where in this case you just minimize the loss with a loss function, which is loss of x is just x squared, so the L2 norm. And this is the traditional linear model where you fit a linear function which minimizes the sum of squares. Okay. So now let's see how this changed when we want to do machine learning with a probabilistic view. So we still observe our data, the XY and the YY. But now what we will do first, in order to analyze this data, is that we will specify a model which we specify a class of model which will describe the relationship between X, the observation, and Y, the output, given a set of parameters, thetas. Here I do a capital thetas to speak about all the parameters. So then once we specify this model, we can estimate our parameters on our labeled example. And so we'll learn the subset of parameters for each class, hat, theta, hat, c. Here I showed, for instance, we would learn the parameters by using maximum likelihood. So taking theta hat as the set, as the parameters which maximize the likelihood of the observation. And we also need the other parameters which correspond to the prior proportion of each class, P of YY equals C. And then the prediction part is done using the model we estimated. So it's conditional on the model. So how does this work? If we think simply about now that we have our model can describe the relationship between observing a data point given the class. We will classify a point according to the best guess given our model, which is that here y hat, our function will just be the value among the possible class of the class which is the most likely given the data and our set of parameters. Okay, so we will take, we classify, given our model and the estimated parameter, we classify a point as being the one which is the most likely. So which has the maximum, here in this example, the maximum a posteriori probability of being, we will classify it to class y hat if it's the maximum, its maximum probability in y. So you see, so in this case, we first make very strong hypothesis how the data is generated. We estimate this function which is generating the data, and we will use this function to decide how we classify the points. So we can talk about, in general, this case, about generative classifier in this type of classifier. And this is different from classifier which will be discriminative, which would be learned only to discriminate between points. So, of course, it's possible to learn and to train discriminative classifier which correspond to a probabilistic formulation. But mainly in the case of this course, we will look at generative classifier. So what is the interest, the advantage and the disadvantages of doing machine learning based on probabilistic models? One of the really strong interests is that you can have a principled approach on learning, so that you can decide how you think your different values are related, constrain this structure, and that's really strong. Which is, of course, it's not always done explicitly when you're using other type of machine learning, discriminative classifier. And it's also because of you're writing the distribution of the data, the full joint distribution over the data and their class. It's relatively easy to cope with missing data. So you can input cases where the data is not available. And so that leads to a natural extension to what is called semi-supervised learning, which is learning where you want to classify points, but only parts of the points have been labeled. And you want to use the points which have not been labeled to do the learning. And one of the interests of this model-based machine learning, which comes from the fact that you have a principled approach, is that, of course, your classifiers are more easily interpretable. So the result you get and the way you're classifying is more easily interpretable than over machine learning. So those are the advantage, but of course there are many. There are also some disadvantages. The main disadvantage is that of course, it's a principled approach. So some of the assumptions you're making on your model can be really strong, and if they are not met by the data, or if they are not met maybe by additional data as you accumulate data, those assumptions can really impair the result when the model starts to be more and more complicated. And so that can have, those assumptions can have a very strong influence on can have a bad influence on the classification. But that's, let's have a price to pay. And of course, and this is what we observe also now with lately in machine learning, is that usually a discriminative classifier can have better performance, like raw performance in classifying the data. And this can be relatively easily explained, is because the task of a discriminative classifier is directly to answer the question that was asked with machine learning, which is to learn a function that will be able to discriminate between the class, or that will be able to predict the effect, value of an effect. Okay. Whereas when we use a model-based machine learning technique, we first learn to model the data. So we first estimate our model of the data, and then conditionally on this model, we will classify. And of course, in this case, the errors of estimation will accumulate with the errors which are linked to something which is directly related to classification. So in practice, the performance can be lower with this type of models. Okay. But just to finish, I think it's still important to look at this kind of data, because this type of model, because this is also, let's say, a toolkit of understanding which type of relationship you can put between variables in order to classify. And to have a principled approach, a model-based approach on those variables, first is a good way then also to guide the design when you're doing also a discriminative classifier with machine learning. Anyway, so back to our learning goals. So we already saw this first part. So we understood, let's say we define what is the task of machine learning, and what is the formulation for machine learning from a probabilistic perspective. So let's move on to introduce our first probability-based classifier, the naive-Bayes classifier. So as a first reminder, we'll I will just recall here the Bayes theorem. So let's have the two types of relationship we'll use throughout the course, which are important. So as you know here, if we have two events A and B, the Bayes theorem states that probability to observe event A, given that we have event B, can be rewritten as the joint probability of A and B divided by the probability of B. And another way to rewrite it, we can also just write it starting from the joint probability. So the joint probability of two events is the probability of one of the event conditionated by the other one times the prior probability, the probability of this other event. Okay, and this formula is symmetric, so you can conditionate A. You can conditionate A by B or B by A. Okay, so I think you're all used to that. Here I wrote the Bayes theorem with event, but it's also completely valid with random variable. So So that's this. You can write this relationship with two random variables, and so that this relationship works for all the values that those random variables could take over the space of value that they can take. Okay, so that's, let's say, a first way. This will be our go-to formula to work with conditioning, and this we will always go through this Bayes theorem to be able to write probability and likelihood from the data. But then, of course, as we saw, if we have many variables, we don't want to be obliged to write a full joint probability. So another notion that will be really important, which I just introduced shortly now, but as we move into the lecture, we'll go more into the detail for that, is the notion of conditional independence. So that we can say, which is a notion of can we write that two variables are independent given that we know another one. And so we say that x and y are independent given another variable z, if and only if the probability distribution of x and y given z is the product of the probability of x given z and y given z. Okay, as I just recall you, if you have you think about independence, simple independence. If you have two variables a and b, you say that a and b are independent if and only if the probability of a joint event is the product of the probabilities. Okay, and so you see here, it's a way to be able to structure our space and to be able to simplify our computation of probability once we conditionate on some of the observation we have. And we can represent, usually we represent those independence, those conditional independence, with a graphical model, which here, in this case of conditional independence, the graphical model shows that if I take out variable z, x and y are not linked anymore, so they are independent. Okay, but we will detail as we move on with our different graphical model. We will learn more and more how to use this graph notation. So let's do a small example to let's say as a refresher and the working example with Bayesian Bayes rule and also our first probabilistic classification. So let's consider we have a population of people which have French or German citizenship, and we just have two binary attributes to describe them. So we have the size of a person, are they big or short, and the color of the hair, so blonde or brown. So we can estimate parameters from those two variables, and it's within this table. So given that someone is German, probability to have someone which is tall blonde is 20% or 0.2, or short brown is 0.3. And let's imagine in the French population, there is no influence on the size or hair color. Okay, and so the question now, or let's say our first classification task, we are in the room where we know that there are 60% German and 40% French. So how could we predict the citizenship of someone which is short and blonde or has, let's say, big brown hair? So what can we do? We can, first let's rewrite this table as a proportional table where we put German and French here, and we can use this first conditioning variable and write it, let's say, use 60% of the 8 for the German and 40% of the 8 for the French, which are the the proportion of the two class, so German or French. And then, of course, in those 60% of German, we have 10% of big brown, 20% of big blonde, etc. And it's equal in the French population. Okay, so I just wanted to show this representation because that's a very practical way also to remember Bayes' theorem in general. And so we have our two binary attributes and we have our class. So now let's see with Bayes, but we do a Bayes geometrical Bayes here on this big square. What's the probability to have someone which is short and blonde? I mean, that's easy. We just take the area here in red and the area in blue, and let's sum them. Okay, and that should give me, because the total area of the square is 1 times 1, so this the probability of having a short blonde is just this area, and so the area of here, this blue square is the probability of having a French person times the probability that this person is French, is small, and blonde. Sorry, I forgot the blonde here. Small blonde. Given that it's French. Okay, and we can do the same within the German population. And so we have a probability of having someone which is short blonde. And that's also a very practical formula that we'll use a lot, is that we want, if we want a marginal probability, the probability of an event, we can divide it, we can expand this probability among a variable where we know that this variable has an influence on the conditioning, so here the citizenship, and then we can compute the conditional probabilities. And so we just have probability of having someone which is short and blonde of 0.34. And then we can directly compute now what is our probability of having someone which is German, given that he's short blonde. It's just the ratio of this red square divided by the red plus the blue square. So we have then a classification of a short blonde as being German. If we use this probability, this posterior probability, we have a probability of 0.71% of a person short blonde, given that the person is short blonde, that this person is from Germany in this room. And so we would classify, using this posterior value, we classify this person as being German. Okay, and as you can see, we could recompute the same thing for all the different classes. So here I just summarized what I just did with a drawing in a more general, with a more general formula, just as a recall. We don't need to spend too much time on this slide. Just to remind you that here, with our definition of machine learning from a probability point of view, our set of parameters is all described by this 1 times 1 matrix, theta, big theta. We have the value of the citizenship it's a binary classification, and we have 2 times 2. Not 2 times 2. We have observation x, which is of dimension 2, and each one is binary. And here I rewrote both formula that we will always use in the following. So the posterior probability, something that we will always compute, the posterior probability of having a class given the observation. It's according to Bayes distribution, is the probability of the class and the observation, which can then summarize as the probability of the class of the observation given the class times the probability of the class. divided by the probability of the data. But usually, what we write, and what you saw already in the previous slide, is that we just write that this probability is proportional to the likelihood, so the probability of the observation given the class, reweighted by the probability of the class. Why can we do like that? Because, in fact, if we look how we compute this value, the probability of the data is just the sum over all the possible class of the value we already computed, we are interested in. So in fact, when we look at an example and we want to have the posterior, we'll compute the posterior over all possible class using this formulation on the right, and then we can just renormalize. Okay? So what does it mean? It means that if we use this classification of the maximum a posteriori, which is the classification which we saw until now, so we classify a point as being the one which has the highest posterior probability given the data we observe. In fact, when we do this computation, if we take the max over all the class, we can, because of this proportionality, we can just take this max over the likelihood of the data, the probability of observing the data given the class times the probability of the class. This is just because of the relationship I showed here. The posterior is proportional to the likelihood times the class prior. Okay, and so this makes the classification really easily. So this is what I showed here in this table. We have the probability of the class times the time prior. You see here, for the example we looked at, short blonde, 0.24 German, 0.1 French, so we have 0.34 as we computed in the example. And if we want to then get the exact posterior, we just renormalize by column here, and so we see we have 0.24 divided by 0.34 to have a German given its short blonde. Okay, so I just want to describe another classification rule, which could be also used, which is the maximum likelihood classification rule, where you would decide the class without taking into account, let's say, how the class, what is the repartition of the class, and you would say, okay, I just take the class which was the one where the data had the most chance to be generated. And so in this case, you see, you just take the max over the probability of generating the data given the class. And so you see the only difference between those two is that in the case of a maximum a posteriori, class are reweighted according to their relative proportion. Okay, and you can see, of course, in this example, that's the interest. If we look at the table, depending on the value, we would classify all those classes as being German, because you see the probability is higher, with a maximum a posteriori, with a maximum likelihood, because of the proportion difference. Here, the big blonde have a higher probability of being German, because in this case the proportion of German is slightly higher, the population we are looking at. If we just look at the evidence from the data, so what's the probability to generate someone which is big blonde given it's a German or French, then with the maximum likelihood classification rule, the rule will be slightly different, and we will classify this person as being French. Okay, this is just to show that we could devise different rules based on the probability we compute. But in practice, so we saw on this example of classification on discrete variable, but in practice, in the next example, we will use the maximum a posteriori classification rule. So what can we notice with this simple example, which is just we had a contingency table, so the joint probability distribution over variable, and we can use this joint probability distribution to classify people according to the probability distribution. The problem is that you see directly now, if we would add other features, the number of parameters will increase as 2 to the power of d, 2 to the power of number of features, so, okay, -1 for each class. So that increases exponentially with the number of class. So that means that to be able to estimate such a distribution, we will need exponentially more values as we increase the number of features. And that's not possible. First, because we, even though we are in the era of big data, we cannot accumulate so much data, but also because we know that many of the features, they will be correlated or they are linked via the relationship. So we need to constrain the dependency, as we said. And this is what we will do with graphical models. So the easiest way to constrain the dependencies between the different features is just to say that they are independent. Once I know the class. Okay, so what we do in this case, we just say, okay, I will, for each class, I can estimate parameters for each features independently. And this is what we can represent here with this here graphical model, as you can see. That's exactly like the other one. It's just that here we have more features, and that's what it's called naive Bayes, because it's the easiest, the simplest type of conditional dependency we could propose for data, just to say that the features are independent and conditionally on the class. And so people call it also stupid Bayes sometimes. So as we will see, despite the fact that it's really stupid or naive, and that it's a very strong assumption which is usually not met, in fact, on many data cases, it performs already quite well. And we will see on the dataset of the project that we already managed to get very good performance with a very small model. So let's just go over the naive Bayes model for real valued data, just to give an example on another type of data with Gaussian. So Gaussian value, you know that. So I took an example from one of the book which is in the literature I gave, which is the Machine Learning, a Probabilistic Perspective from Kevin Murphy. And so here it's also a very, let's say, a toy example where we look at adult Westerners and we look at their height and weight. So it's, so you can see it's an American book, so it's in inches and pounds, but we should be able to manage with that. And we have male and female. And so here you have a plot of the data according to the class. You can see that there is a clear difference between male and female in terms of height and weight. So traditional way to do to learn this model would be to say, okay, we have a two-dimensional Gaussian between height and weight, where we would learn for each class the mean, the vector of height and weight mean, and then a covariance matrix, which will be of dimension 2 by 2. Okay, so that will be a first way to go, but this will be also, let's say, you would have to learn for each class 2 means, and then 4 parameters for the standard deviation. Okay, so 6 parameters. If you do the naive Bayes classifier, you just assume that the features are conditionally independent given the class. So that in this case, for each class, the probability of observing X, so a combination of height and weight given the class, just the product of the probability of each of the feature separately. So in this case, for each feature, we just keep a standard deviation estimate and a mean estimate. So we go from 6 parameters we had before, 2 plus 4, 6 parameters. And here we just have 2 plus 2, 4 parameters. So you see we make the economy of a lot of parameters. And so you just have to estimate a Gaussian for the height and the weight in the male and the female. And you can see, if you look at the distribution, that already there will be in height, there is a relatively good separation between male and female, and the weight also. So how do you do in practice with this data? First, you need to train it. So you will take a train set where the examples are labeled, in this case. And so you have height and weight, and you know if it's a male or a female, and you can derive a mean and a standard deviation for the height and the weight in the male and the female class. This is the value that you get here. And then when you do testing, it's the same. You will want to classify an example, for instance, as a male, given its height and weight, with a maximum posterior. I'm sorry. With a maximum a posteriori with a map value. And so, as we saw already, this probability is the probability of observing the data given the class, reweighted by the probability of the class, and normalized by the probability of the data. Okay, and as we saw, this is proportional to p de x given y equal m times p de y equal m. And we'll just have to compute in practice always this quantity here for both class to be able then to use our normalization. In this example, we can just also assume that both classes have the same probability, have the same proportion. And so we see that this maximum a posteriori is the same as the maximum, will be the same as the maximum likelihood classification. And the posterior probability, the probability of observing the data is just written as the probability of observing the data on both classes. So for testing, let's just work out a real example. Let's imagine we have a case here with 72 and 72 pounds, 72 inches and 180 pounds. The probability of observing the data given, the probability of having a male given that we observe those two values is proportional by 1/2, that's the prior of the male class, times the likelihood, the probability of the data given the class. We just use the normal distribution we estimated to compute this probability, and we obtain 1/2 of 1.5 10 to the minus 3. We can do that for the second class the same way. We have 1/2 of 6.7 10 to the minus 6. You see here, because of its, I just computed, in fact, I don't even keep this normalizing factor, the class priors, because we don't need it. And the probability of y being a male given the observed data, as we did before, is just the normalized probability, and we have let's say, a very strong support from the probabilistic model that this person is a male, and we can compute in the same way for the other example. And of course, for some boundary cases, so for instance this one, which is at 68 of 8, which is here, for male and female, and 155 of weight, something like that. You can see that, of course, we cannot really decide if this example is more male or female. And so that's something that I didn't put in the pros and cons, but that's also a very strong, let's say that's a very good advantage of using probabilistic model, that when you're able to compute those posterior probabilities, you can also assess the confidence you have in your result. So you can decide that if a posterior probability or if your classification, your probability of belonging to a class is too near from 1/2 or it's not strong enough, and you can just decide that you don't want to classify a point. Okay, so this was just a very simple example again with normal distribution. So real value data to see something else. Now we'll go back to discrete data and the example of document classification, which is a very traditional classical subject also, where, for instance, for all email program, they have a function that allow to learn and to classify an email saying is it a spam or is it non-spam. And so the non-spam are usually, but you will see that in the small project, it's called ham. So that will be also, it's let's say a short introduction to the project for this week. And so just before seeing how we do the model, let's just see what is a way of reckoning an email into a vector of features. And so what is used usually, the simple representation for a text document is to use what you call the bag of words, where you, in fact, decide of a corpus, you decide of a list of words that you are interested in. Usually you list all the words which are present in your data, and you enumerate them, and then you give them a number. And so you have, let's say, all the vocabulary that you could have. And then a document is just described by the presence and absence of words in the corpus. So this is what you can see in a representative, let's say, with the image here below, is that you have a matrix. Each document corresponds in a row in this matrix, and each word is a column. And we can see that, and of course, so if a word occurs in document, we color it in white, and if a word doesn't occur, it's colored in black. And you can see that depending, it's newsgroup data, depending on the type of newsgroup, the usage of a word is quite different. So for instance, this comp newsgroup doesn't use at all the words which are below 0, which have index below 0 and 8 or something, or the words which are around here. Whereas the reg group or the talk group use those words a lot. And the goal of this bag of word model and of classification is just to construct a function that using this word usage will decide if the email is a spam or if it's not a spam. Okay, and so that's the model that is used. And so what is the, so this will be detailed in the exercise, but what is the value? So for each of those points, we can take two values, 0 or 1. So we can say it's like success or failure. And so each of the word, as given the class, will have a certain probability to occur. And so the class density, so the probability to observe all the words given the class C, will just be the product, so the joint support for each of the words, given theta CD is the probability that this word occur, the word D occur in class C, reweighted by the fact that we observed it or not. So on the training data, we can learn those values relatively simply. It's just the proportion of time the word D occurs in class C divided by the total number of words in class C. And of course, you can also use pseudo-counts or other techniques to improve this classification. And so you can then you obtain for each class word frequency. So those are classes which are different from the one I showed in the example, but you can see that depending on the class, some words are more used. So this word, for instance, or this word, are much more typical of class 2 than other words. This word here doesn't seem to be very specific of any other class. But those class probability can then be used. Those class conditional densities will then be used as a way to decide for a text, for a document, if it's a spam or a non-spam, so a ham. So this is what you will do in the exam. So to summarize, so we arrive at the end of the lecture. We saw what is the task of machine learning. We saw the formulation from the probabilistic perspective. And we saw, let's say, a first description of the naive Bayes classifier. So I just wanted to give at the end a short practical information for the next lecture and how this will work. So for the next lecture, I will produce the lecture live, so at the time of the course, which is planned, but they will be recorded as well, so that we can keep the interaction. And I'm not planning to do a 1 hour lecture like today. So if there is, this will be between, let's say, 30 minutes and 45 minutes lecture. And we will have another interactive part for each lecture. I will correct the exercise. And we will do the presentation of the small projects in Teams. So we'll decide each time who wants to present. So of course, we can also interact offline using the form on Moodle if you have questions on the exercise. And if you want to ask more precise questions or discuss, you can also make an appointment by email with me or using the form. So we will discuss that today. And on the time of the course between 12 and 12:30 on Thursday. But so we'll discuss those details. And of course, for the small project, I'm completely okay if you prefer to prepare that in group. But there will be you will have to do those presentations once in a while. Now, let's say to present one person from the group, to divide the presentation between persons from the group. Okay, so that was it for today. I hope you enjoy this lecture and will be completely open during the interactive part for any type of question and also to do a few of the exercises.